In this one, Judgment of Light and Dark Judgment build guide with Elementalist specialization. Let's talk about starter skill board, zodiac charms, relics, and later game setups for both critical and maximized builds. Before that, there are a few important things to note, and all of that comes from the enormous tooltip that the skill rune has. First of all, we want to have both skill runes awaken to rarity, in order not to remove the stacks when using different skills. It's not important when testing your damage in the training arena, but when doing maps, we are using a lot of movement skills, which resets the stacks consistently. Both Judgment of Light and Dark Judgment stacks have important interactions. Judgment of Light provides extra area of effect and damage amplification to the skill, but also makes it so Dark Judgment uses at least +1 projectile on the enemy location. It's a guaranteed hit, which increases damage tremendously. That's why we want to use both skills in combination. Dark Judgment stacks gives a little bit of extra damage amplification and elemental resistance dampening per stack. Basically, damage increase without any extra ward. Starter skill board for the Judgment. We have Judgment of Light and Dark Judgment. On Judgment of Light, we don't need to focus as much on the damage, we want to focus more on utility, as the skill itself, it doesn't do that much damage, or by comparison to Dark Judgment, it does very little damage. We want to go for confidence, for cast speed basically. Just remember, if you are doing barrier build from the beginning, you can't do confidence, as confidence gives you barrier region immunity. Quick cast, just for some cast speed, additional fire damage, this one is important, always have this one, and preserve mana. Preserve mana, you can't buy it from the shop, but it's a normal link rune. And you can buy it from the Gamba boxes for the gold in the shop. It shouldn't take too many boxes to pick up, even though it doesn't really matter. There is not really a good link rune to add on the Judgment of Light. The only reason I'm adding Preserve Mana in here, because it's gonna fix your mana issues, as it regens your mana depending on how much mana you spend in the last moments. So basically, Judgment of Light in here is as utility. And you can switch Preserve Mana into any other link rune that you have. We have spell activation on spell hit. This is important. You want to have this one, as it has the least amount of damage dampening for the activated skill. We have the Dark Judgment, and Dark Judgment is basically our main damage link rune. I have Extract Fire in here. This is the main reason. And extract fire energy on both. That's why we want to have additional fire damage. If you don't have additional fire damage on this skill or on our gear, you're not going to be able to extract fire energies. So yeah, fire energies on both of the skills. I picked up Slaughter for some extra crit damage. Area of Effect, it's important as we scale highly from the area of effect. Find weakness and additional fire damage. Every single link rune in here, you can basically attain it in the Act 1 even, or Act 2. I'm picking up Seal of Critical Chance, as this is a critical build for attack seal. For the movement abilities, Leap Attack and Roll linked with Disarm. You can use even Teleport, but I really like Leap Attack together with Roll, especially early in the game, after the Leap Attack buffs. Marksman as attack enhance, but you can also use Release Element. The reason I'm using Marksman is hit rate becomes much more valuable than a little bit of cast speed, as by default you should be running 5 cast speed, basically a capped cast speed. So that cast speed on the Release Element doesn't do much. Hit rate is better, plus Marksman actually has a little bit more projectile damage amplification. So it's more amp. It's linked with increased duration and time acceleration together with Bulwark of Protection. For Shadow Provocation in here is just for the arm amplification with Lingering Shout, Hushed Shout, Predator's Roar, and buff activation when hit, so it would proc automatically. Starter Zodiacs. For the stats themselves, just use your points so you could equip your items and skill runes. There is no default way to do this. For the Zodiacs themselves, we go in here for the Cliff. We want to pick up fire, as we're gonna focus on the fire damage. In here, we can easily go for projectile damage. This is important. We want to stack as much area effect as possible on this build, so focus on that. We also want to pick up Twisted Element. Invest these points. At 22 points, we have unlocked our first specialization. and we want to go into Brilliance. With this, there is a few problems. We want to go for cast speed amplification. That means our cast speed is going to be insanely high. We would like to pick up Convert Mana as soon as we can, but the problem is, by picking Convert Mana, you're going to start taking damage. There is a way to solve it, but you want to go this way. We can only spend 7 points in here. 2 extra points we're gonna be able to unlock when we reach the Saluto town after the campaign. And if you pick up Convert Mana in here, we really want to pick up HP on every spell hit. In most cases, it should solve your issues. However, when you get more HP, that 2 HP on every hit might not be enough. But this for the early game should be enough. Of course, we critical build, we go Elaborate, we can also pick up Rainbow Bridge. If we still lack some cast speed, we can go Mirage for cast speed amplification. At 47 points, at 45 points, we have second spec unlocked. On the second spec, we want to go for as much damage amplification as possible. We want to go Sunspot for extra projectile count. On the Dark Judgment, the projectile count from the Link runes doesn't work, but it does work from the Zodiacs. And this is a huge damage increase. Solar Activity, that means damage spell, damage amp one spell, and resource cost amplification. That's why, because of this resource cost amp, it might be hard to maintain your mana. We want to go for mana absorb one spell hit, and this is a utility option. Later, we will want to remove this and just go into damage amplification, but for now, we have only 7 points, the same thing as on spec 1. We need to finish the questline in Saluto for 2 extra points. We want to go in here, pick up Avery Effect, Annihilation. In here we want to pick up even more Area Effect, Desertification, then into Thirst for Elements. As soon as we unlock Trait 8, we want to pick up Display of Lightning in order to be able to apply shock to the enemies. And for that we need additional lightning damage and the Twisted Element, which is status effect rate. This is what we're looking for. With 75 points, we have the third spec and we go for Elementalist. Particle Creation and Fire Element Amplification. After that, debuffed enemies. And with this is a huge power spike to the build that we are doing. Elementalist is a really strong node. There is a few reasons for it, but that's too much explanation. Go Elementalist, you're gonna be happy. In this case, we kinda have everything we need to. We can go into Flow of Flames and Burning Wild Nature. We want to have max fire energies, as this build heavily relies on the fire energies themselves, as fire energies give you spell damage amplification, and we have spell damage. With the leftover points, we can do quite a few things. Go in here, pick up Viper and Fang. Let's spend 1 point to Power of Harmony. We definitely gonna have 200 Strength, Intelligence, and Dexterity. It's really easy to obtain that. We have 4 extra points, and we want to pick up Sweep. We don't care about weapon range, but we do care about strike damage amplification. There are 4 points left, but those 4 points supposed to be spent on Spec 1 and Spec 2. So, that's how early Zodiacs look like. Charm blessings for this build are Capri, Alyssa, Lewa, and Caster. It means that we only want to have those type of charms. Any other charm is gonna be good, but we're not gonna get extra scaling that we get from the blessing. For example, Capri gives fire damage amplification, Alyssa gives area damage amplification, so by focusing on those specific charms, we get quite a bit of extra damage. For the charm affixes on a critical build, we want to have critical rate and critical damage multipliers all the time. These 2 affixes are the most important. The third one can be anything. Maximize damage would be the best in slot charm, especially when we tap into a hybrid build. As we do critical rate, critical damage, we also want to do maximize damage as a hybrid build. But if you don't have maximize damage, any third affix is good. It can be damage multiplier, it can be HP, elemental resistances. Anything that is third affix is gonna work. For the blessing themselves, as I said, Alyssa, Leo, Capri, Castor, those are the most important ones. For the legendary prefix on those charms, we want to have maximization chance, as maximization chance is gonna be the highest damage we can get from the legendary prefix. And that is because it enables us to do a hybrid build, critical plus maximized. And it's a huge damage increase. And the second best is that strike damage amplification. For the relics, we want to start with Alyssa, and don't forget to summon, as the active skill only works for the summoned relic. On the passive side, we want to pick up Enhanced Fire Energy for extra energy count. On the active, we want to go Hellfire. And Hellfire is gonna be insanely good damage scaling mechanic for this build. It's really important to have this one. This is the most damage that we're gonna get. We want to have cooldown recovery speed and increase buff effect on the Hellfire. For the second one, we can go Castor and pick up Enhanced Range for the AVF effect. Also, we can use Strength if you lack a little bit to equip armor-based gear. Sabda in here is for the Chaos Resist, and the last one is gonna be Boreal, as it can only be level 15 for some extra HP. For the maximized build, we want to do two changes. First one is, instead of Seal of Critical Chance, we want to use Seal of Persistence, and we want to use Band of Sinity Unique Ring. Without the ring, the damage is not gonna be as high. On the Judgment of Light, we don't need to change any link runes. On the Dark Judgment, we want to change all of the criticals that we had. And there is a problem, there are not that many good choices on the Judgment link rune wise, at least the ones that you can buy early from the shop. And the only option is to use Persistence, which is a maximized damage specific one, and spell damage increase early. Later, we're gonna change those into something much more powerful. For the Zodiacs, instead of Elaborate, we want to go for Distorted Senses. For the charms themselves, we have a few changes. Charm blessings are the same. However, we want to pick up damage multiplier and maximize damage. And these two are the most important ones. The third one can be anything. It can be damage when two-handed, elemental resistances, even HP multipliers, whatever you need the most. For the legendary prefix, we only scale from strike damage amplification. And this is what we're aiming for. There is a few changes and a lot more assumptions. So first assumption is that you no longer need additional fire damage and you have it on your gear. And be sure, otherwise, you're not gonna be doing fire damage with this build. And you want to do fire damage in order to extract fire energies. And to scale from the fire damage, from the relics and so on. As the judgments take the highest elemental damage from your stats and does that type of damage. So we want to have fire damage. Another one is that we no longer need cast speed, as we have it capped from our items, from the crafts, and so on. That being said, third assumption is that we are fully investing into barrier, and we kind of want to invest into barrier. Even though barrier is kind of really hard to do and requires a lot of setup. But it gives us overflow energy link rune, and this build lacks good link runes. And one of the main reasons that we are doing barrier is to pick up this overflow energy link rune. So let's start. We have overflow energy, awaken it to source, extract fire energy, consider the area damage, awaken it to source. We don't need AV effect on this one, as our main damage is Dark Judgment, and giving it a little bit more damage from concentrated area damage is a good choice. Mana Storm, awaken it to Verity, but this one you don't have to use, you can still use Preserve Mana or any other link rune for the utility, as Mana Storm might break your mana as it increases the resource cost by quite a bit, from 16 to 31. So be careful with that one. Ignition Explosion, this one is awaken it to Origin, and remember it to awaken to Origin, it's really important. We have Spell Activation on Spell Hit, into Dark Judgment, awaken it to Verity. We want to have Dark Judgment awaken it to Verity and Judgment of Light awaken it to Verity, because both of the awakenings does exactly the same thing. It does not remove the stacks from the judgments on using different skills. For the Dark Judgment, we want to have Extract Fire Energy, Strike awaken it to Source, Area Effect awaken it to Origin. We scale from Area Effect, Overflow Energy awaken it to Source, and Ignition Explosion, but this time awaken it to Source instead of Origin. We want to have as much damage jump in here, as Judgment of Light is gonna be the one that applies the burn effect on the enemies, while Dark Judgment gets a huge damage jump against burn enemies but can't apply it by itself. I also added Cold Armor in here for the extra barrier multiplier, as an active toggle. I didn't add too many toggles in here because managing your mana is probably gonna be the hardest thing on this build. I have 2 Seal of Critical Chance. You can also use Seal of Striking if you don't need Seal of Critical. So basically you don't need any more critical rate on your build. Cold Armor, Awakening to Source. Then we have Marksman, Awakening to Origin. I added on this one Decreased Duration, but be careful. This might decrease your damage if your maximum duration is really low. Also Enhance Effect, Awakening to Source, and Totem activation when using Enhance skill. And it goes to Weakened Totem, Awakening to Source. On the Weakened Totem, we have Area Totem, Awakening to Source, and Enhanced Totem, Awakening to Origin. I switched Bulwark of Protection with Pantheon. Pantheon is really strong for the barrier builds. I also added buff activation when hit, so you wouldn't need to press Pantheon yourself. It's Awakening to Origin. But pressing Pantheon for yourself is also a good choice. This is a little bit later when you don't really care about that extra regen and you have bunch of barrier already. Added Channel of Justice to remove the hard CC. And if we have buff activation on crowd control, it's gonna do that automatically. It's also linked with Hushed Shout and Lingering Shout. On the Zodiacs, a few changes. Let's start with the easiest ones. At this stage, you should have all the available points on your specializations. Pick up that. In here, you're not supposed to need the Mana Absorb spell hit anymore. You should be able to craft that on your items or somewhere else. You want to go into as much damage amplification as you can. If you still have the problems, you will have to make some suboptimal decisions. After this one, we can start removing some points and readjusting those. So the easiest one is this one. As we no longer need HP, we can dampen the HP to get the projectile damage amplification, which we scale from. We don't need any more cast speed. And at the same time, we don't need Rainbow Bridge anymore on the critical build. With those extra points left, we can also remove Display of Lightning. This one should be on your Lacrima on your weapon as an affix. We can pick up cold damage in order to start freezing the enemies. We should also be able to pick up Place of Intellect for 5% damage jump on 500 intelligence or more. You should definitely have that easily. We have 2 points left. We can do some changes, so on, but I would suggest just to pick up the easy decisions is to go on mana and on barrier on every spell hit. This is gonna fix or at least alleviate a little bit of the mana problems, and having a little bit of extra barrier on every hit is also a good choice. There is many more min-maxing to do, but this one you should be able to obtain pretty easy in the game. For the maximized build, again, we need Seal of Persistence, and remember to use Band of Certainty. On the skills themselves, we can pick up Smash instead of Ignition Explosion, and on Judgment of Light, instead of Mana Storm, we can definitely run Smash. And for the Zodiacs themselves, only one change. We want to go into Distorted Senses. And now the most important part of the build, and that is the Hellfire effect. And the Hellfire effect is gonna be the main damage scaling that we have that is really easy obtainable, and you can start doing it super early in the game. So why does this matter that much? When you're gonna craft your items, any multi-authority items or even single authority items, you're gonna be able to low craft on the alchemy bench, even something like Enhanced Skill Rune Duration, into Hellfire effect. And it's really important to do this, as 10% of Hellfire effect is equal to 1% damage amp. And the amount you can craft of Hellfire effect can be around 100% and even more than 100%. That means every single of that craft is gonna be equal to 10% damage amplification and another 10% of fire penetration. The Hellfire scales so good, and it's so easy to do, and considering that fire energies also is good for the spell damage increase, this is such an easy way to scale your damage, and it should be doable for every single player in the game. At the same time, you can also craft Hellfire as an authority mod on the rings. Before saying bye-byes, check the description for the Excel file. As in the Excel file, there's gonna be all of the itemization needed for this build and many more builds. I wanted to do a little bit more on this specific build guide, but I'm gonna leave that for another videos, as at some point I'm gonna start playing this build in the Season 8. Not right now, as the Ash event is too good to skip. Need to grind more materials in order to craft all of the gear necessary. But for now, GG's, bye bye, and see you in the next one.